Okay, now we're going to remove the bottom half of the toolbox, and again another 4 10 mils. We remove the toolbox. We actually have to remove the rack. So those look like probably 2 12 mils. These bolts have a collar on them. Okay, now that the rack is off, the toolbox can slide out through the back like that. Primer's all dried up, so now we're just going to go ahead and give it a first light coat of red paint. Yeah, that's coat number 1. Okay, let's give her another coat of red. Okay, on the back rack, I'm just going to take a wire brush and knock all the loose stuff off to start. Okay, we're going to start trying to figure out why the electric start isn't working. First thing we're going to do is take this control box apart and see what wires are going into the actual button. We're about to tackle the electrical nightmare on this 250 Big Red. Lots of fun. You know, it's not a real complex system, but once people start cutting wires and just taping stuff together and you don't know what's going on, it can be a nightmare. But a simple test light and a voltmeter will hopefully eliminate a lot of our questions. Okay, so the first thing I did in the first video, was you saw me take power from the 4Runner and put it to the positive lead where the battery would go and the negative lead where the battery would go. And I pushed the button on the handlebars to see if I could actuate the starter. Nothing. It didn't work whatsoever. What I'm going to do, just to help explain it a little better, is I'm taking power from the mighty 4Runner. Alright, so now the 3-wheeler should technically have its own power. Alright. But we had no key switch. We're like, oh man, we got no key switch. So how do we, if we don't have a key switch, we don't have spark, nothing is going to work. So what I didn't show you in the first video is, this isn't my first rodeo. I did show you that those were the wires for the key switch. Okay, this black and the red, when these two are touching together, your key is now turned on. When they are apart from each other, your key is now turned off. These other two wires, they go from like your light switch. They do a couple other things. I can't remember if it's like a neutral safety switch. A couple of little things, but right now we're not worried about those. What we want is the key to be on. So we take that, we just tie those together for now. Now our key is turned on, we have power. You would think the headlight would come on, but it's not going to, because I can already see that it's unhooked, but it will be running off the engine when it turns on. When the bike is running, the headlight will come on. Okay, so we wire those together. We got power. Now I'm pushing the button, the start button, and it's still not working. So what I did was I went into the back of the headlight assembly here, and in these two white capsules you'll have bus fuses. Okay, I already pulled those out. I looked at them, they're good. Put them back in there. I pulled all those connectors out, cleaned them with some contact cleaner, put them all back in there, checked all my connections. Everything is okay. I even checked for power at a couple locations there. Everything's all right there. So there's nothing happening in this box. So I'm going to set that to the side. So then what I did, I'm gonna find my test light here. Okay. So I'm pushing the button, nothing's happening. I got a test light, everybody has one of these, it's like $5. Okay, I'm gonna find a ground. This screw right here will work on the forks. Take that positive lead of the test light here, and on the back of that switch, the actual start button, I touch it. Now I initially thought that the power was going to be coming from this yellow with the red stripe, but actually it was wrong. It's actually coming from that brown and black wire. Okay, if I take this test light and I touch that black and brown and slide it on over, I don't know if you can hear that. If I slid it on over and I touch that yellow and red, the starter started to move. So that right there told me that immediately that this switch is no good. Once you take this out of the control box there, it's gonna look like this. Okay, hopefully you can see this. So you got that little button in there, little contact point. So you want to clean that contact point, and there's that little copper ring around the whole thing. That's part of the circuit as well. So this is half of the circuit. Half of the switch, sorry. The other half of our button. And that's it right here. Yeah, that's the rest of the controls. Here's our button. This spring is very important. It's part of the switch. This little cap is another part of the switch. You see that? Okay, it's all made out of copper. This cap sits right in, that's your start button. This cap sits right inside, just like that. And that spring sits on top of that. Okay, where are we here? There we are. So what's happening is when we push our button, the spring is always in contact, but when we push that button down, it touches the other button and completes the switch's circuit. Okay? But as you can see, oh, we're not getting any contact. It's not working. So there's no contact in that button. So what I'm gonna say is this is filthy and dirty and we need to clean it up. And then we'll check it again. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to clean up the top of that button all the way around the edge of the button, because that's where the spring rides, and if the spring doesn't make contact, we don't have a complete circuit. Okay, that's all cleaned up and shiny. You don't have to go crazy with it, because if you lose more material, you're going to have to push that button really hard to get it to work. Okay, so that's cleaned up. Now the other half of the switch, like I showed you on the bench, you got that little cap. Clean up the top of that cap. Clean around the edges of the cap. Get that shined up decent. Now the spring. Focus. The spring is the same thing. We want to just kind of clean both ends of the spring to get a decent contact. Okay, the moment of truth. We got our spring, the button, and that little dimple. We put the button on the top. Put the spring down on top. Now the bike still has power and I still have the key switch on. So when I collapse this, we should have some sort of starter noise. Moment of truth. Hey, all right. The button is back in action. Okay, now that our button is fixed, we got to figure out some sort of switch for our key here. So I'm probably just going to put some sort of toggle on it for now. Because like I said, I just want to get this thing back on the trail. And if I can just put a toggle switch to turn the key on and our electric start button is working, we're all set. Okay, we got the controls back on. Just gonna put power back to the machine here. Apply power to the bike. Key switch is wired up. Let's try our button. Our button works. All right. Okay, so I rotated the engine and I lined up my marks. Maybe a little mark in there. Probably can't see it right now. You line up the mark and the notch in the case. And when you do that, both your cam lobes should be down, so your valves will be relaxed. Okay, then you know you're at top dead center. Another quick way to test is to just put a screwdriver in there and make sure it hits the top of the piston right away. Okay, normally I do the valves by hand. I'll just stick my fingers in there and wiggle them around, make sure they have a little bit of play, but you don't want any noise out of it. But for the point of the video here, we're going to use the our feeler gauge and see what we got. Okay, you just take your feeler gauge, and it's going to be kind of hard to video this and do it at the same time, but you just want to take that part of the feeler gauge, slide it in between the top of the valve stem and the rocker arm here. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, that slides in there. Now you should just feel I don't know if you can see that or not, but you should be able to feel just a little bit of drag when you're trying to pull that out. And normally I do valves on these old Trikes. I just do it by feel. So once you get it at the right position, top dead center, valves are both relaxed, I just grab that rocker arm and I just give it a little bit of a, is that focusing? I just wiggle it back and forth just a little bit. So it should be loose back and forth, but if you try to lift up and down on it, if you can make noises with that, like make it tap, then it's too loose and you need to tighten it. But this one, I can't move it up and down. Very, very little it'll go up and down, but it is loose side to side. So I'm going to call that perfectly fine, and do the same for the intake valve. And the truth is these are actually both within spec. The noisy part of this engine is our timing chain. The timing chain is likely stretched over time, and I can tell this by the way it sounds, and also when I look inside our case here, you can see the notch is actually past the other notch. So you get the one on the side right here, and then you get the one that's kind of up there a little bit. That's a pretty good sign that, and I know that I'm at top dead center. I know that it's perfect that way. So, yeah, I'm going to say that timing chain is stretched, but the valves are within spec. And unless I was going to tear this whole engine apart, split that case, and replace the timing chain, I'm going to leave it just the way it is. Okay, let's say we wanted to adjust our valves. Let's say they were too loose or too tight. You would just back that 10 mil bolt off, turn that square piece left or right. Clockwise would be tightening the valve, and counterclockwise would be loosening the valve. And then you hold it still while you crank that 10 mil down and make it tight again. And sometimes as you tighten down that 10 mil, the valve is actually going to want to tighten a little bit. So you want to keep that in mind when you are adjusting that valve. But these ones are within spec, so we're going to leave it because we know that the timing chain is slightly stretched and it's getting a little noisy, but it's not that bad. If I was going to do the timing chain, I would probably be putting a piston and rings in this as well, because in order to do the timing chain on a 250 Big Red, you actually got to split the case to get at the bottom of the chain. So this would all have to come apart, and it turns into a pretty big job. But for now, I think I'm just gonna leave the valves where they are and put them back together, change the oil, and I'm gonna call this good. Okay, that's all I got for this video. We made some pretty good progress. I'm actually about to jump in the truck and go get some parts from the dealership. Gonna grab a battery, an air filter, some engine oil, probably a new spark plug. I haven't made a decision on the gas tank yet. I kind of want to grind off all that old gunk and maybe solder it back together. And the reason I'm saying that is because the price of a plastic replacement tank for this Big Red is actually more than I paid for the Big Red itself. At the end of this project, we're going to be totaling up everything that I spent on this machine, getting it back on the trail and whatnot. In the next video, we're gonna put this bad boy all back together, get it completed, and get out on the trail, get some mud on the tires, and get that front wheel off the ground and have some fun. If you guys enjoy this stuff, please hit that like button. And if you really enjoy this kind of project, hit the subscribe button because I got a lot more lined up to come. All right, thanks for watching, guys.